Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Brad Behrens.
Come on in, everybody. Make yourselves comfortable. So did we have a good day at AdTech so far? All right. Excellent. So it's been a stunning day, both in the conference and the expo floor. And we started the morning with an award to Jeff Ramsey. At AdTech San Francisco, we give away 3 industry achievement awards. Can we bring the slide up, please? And we're going to give away another one right now. And I'm really very pleased. This is somebody who I've known for a long time. Remember, I'm not a voting member of the committee, so when it's somebody who I really, really like, that's just a nice to have for me, but I had nothing to do with it, so it's doubly exciting for me. So in order to present the award, we're going to welcome out to the stage one of the previous recipients of the award, actually from the first class. Many of you in the room know him. He is a legendary guy in the industry, and he's another good friend, Mr. Scott McClernand. Please welcome Scott. Take it away.
Thank you, sir. Nice to see you, Brad. Where's Weaver? Ah, there he is. All right, so good afternoon. Last year, I had the honor of introducing somebody who really needs no introduction, and this year, I also have that honor with Mr. Weaver. Doug's success here in our industry is a pretty simple formula. Build a good, strong, compelling point of view, stick with it. And so he has. Sales trainer, consultant, bi-weekly newsletters, hourly tweets. The man clearly just loves telling us what to do. Doug is the rare individual whose advice and counsel is sought after by many different parts of our industry. Sales planners, account executives, chief revenue officers, publishers everywhere. We all line up in his inbox, his voicemail, and his classrooms. By my count, 10,000 of us have attended his training. And despite the fact that for 15 years he's made a living telling us to blow right past the agency and snuggle up to the client, those same agencies seem to seek his advice too. Clearly, they don't read Doug's weekly opinion piece. Quite simply, if you're in the media side of this industry, then Doug's influence has had an impact on you one way or the other. Personally, I had the good fortune of working side by side with the Reverend Weaver for 2 terrific years. Not only did he make me a very better person at what I do, he also amazed me every single day. With his maddening attention to detail, his ease for the written word, and his ability to crank out volumes of work never ceased to amaze me, frustrate me, and royally piss me off. So Doug will tell you that he has the best gig in the industry. No doubt, living on the side of a mountain in beautiful Vermont with a 2-stop sign commute, that ain't all bad. And I'll tell you that we're all better by him having it. If you're not one of the 7,000 subscribers to the Drift newsletter, then you should be. If you aren't one of his 5,000 followers on Twitter, then follow him. He touts one simple mantra in a variety of different ways, but it really comes down to this. Lead with a client's needs. Do your homework. Prepare. And be sure to look at it from the client's perspective. Always prepare as if you were the other guy on the other side of the table. So it's along that note of looking at things from the other person's perspective, I'll finish with one quick anecdote. A short while ago, I was in Aspen, and at the top of Aspen Highlands, there's a steep, arduous, nasty 30-minute climb in ski boots. It goes right to the top of Aspen Highlands, and you do this where there's no oxygen. I shared the story of the hike with Doug, and he said, wow, that must have felt like quite an accomplishment. I said, yeah, I thought I'd done something pretty special until I looked over, and there at the top of the mountain, doing the same climb that I thought was pretty terrific, was this 9-year-old boy that had just accomplished what I thought was this amazing feat. Well, Doug quickly put that in Weaver-esque perspective for me when he said, well, hang on. How do you think that kid felt? He was probably pretty proud of what he'd done until he looked over and he saw some 53-year-old media executive was out of shape, made the same climb. So that, in a nutshell, is the key to our industry achievement winner's success. So Doug, if you would, please come up here and join me, and I'll give you your award. Doug Weaver, ladies and gentlemen. Now, oh, wait a minute. Oh, man. You've hung with me for how many years? And do I leave stuff behind? I forgot the award. Does somebody have, oh my God, does somebody have the award?
Oh, my God.
Mrs. Weaver, Mrs. Sharon Richards, ladies and gentlemen, Doug's wife. Sharon flew 3,000 miles to be here this evening to present him with this award. Amazing. Wonderful. Yeah, I'll join you. I think that we've taken up enough time on the stage. Mr. Weaver?
I got nothing. Wow. That's, there's very few times in my life that I've been completely speechless. I am completely speechless, but I'll do the best that I can. So I was told that I have 3 minutes to talk about this wonderful award, to tell you guys what I love about the industry and what I'm excited about for tomorrow. And I'm going to do that in 2 minutes. And I want to save the final minute to talk about somebody who's very near and dear to my heart. So first, let me just say to all of you, thank you. This is truly a great day in my life. May you each have at least one day like this one, because this is truly gratifying. Scott, to have the respect of someone that you respect so much and the friendship of someone who is such a close friend, I can't say enough. So many wonderful, wonderful people in this business. Scott, you were right at the very top of that list. What I love about the industry hasn't really changed since that moment 17 years ago on the lawn at South Park when Louis Rossetto hired me to run the East Coast for Wired magazine. I distinctly remember thinking, I may never fully grasp all of this, but this thing that we're doing, this digital revolution, as he called it, somehow this is going to change everything. Somehow this is going to take communication and marketing and all the things that I was a part of up until then and just render them all brand new again. Well, Louis was right. Everything that he talked about back then in those hyperbolic terms, they all changed. You know, they all happened. It all came to fruition, right? The change was real. The effect was profound. And I think about that. I think that we're all living and working during this time of just amazing change. You heard the CMO from Visa talk about it this morning. 29 years in marketing, and this is the most profound period of change that he's ever seen. And we, all of us, get to be here. How can you draw breath and have a pulse and not be motivated and energized and engaged by that? How can you not love that? I do. What excites me most about the future? Well, two things. First, I believe that we're entering into a distinct new phase of our business. Call it the marketing era. We're going to move beyond simple targeting, trading, and placement of ads and into a world of business solutions. We'll be engaging bigger customers about bigger issues. And we'll be operating with much bigger budgets and much bigger authority as a result of that. And in this era, media sales, this profession that I've been a part of and tried to improve over half my life, is going to undergo a renaissance and become one of this decade's most creative business disciplines. To play even a small part in that evolution is just amazingly gratifying to me. Now, I got to rip up the last part of the speech because it says, in an ideal world, my wife Sharon would be on the stage with me. So clearly I've got to punt at this point and come up with something brand new. But, and I just, you have to understand that I just was furiously sending her emails today saying, go on the web, go to adtech.com/YouTube, you can watch this. I've been had. So I was going to say that most of you may never have a chance to meet her, but you can all meet her now, she's here. But Sharon, let me just say this to you very personally, that you're the reason why I'm up here today. And you're the one who has shown me how to dream big dreams, never settle for what's easy or what's reasonable. You're the reason why we live on the side of a mountain in Vermont, and I get to make a living telling people what to do and what I think. And who wouldn't love that? This lady, by the way, is all the time that I've gotten to do all this and have all these great times and meet such wonderful people. She's been devoting her life to infecting kids through her work as a librarian, infecting kids with the joy of reading, and raising our two amazing daughters into amazing young women. So I am just truly blessed. And since they don't give Lifetime Achievement Awards for any of the stuff that she's been doing, we're going to share this one starting tonight. So this is for you as well. So to AdTech, to Scott, to the past recipients who voted to give me this wonderful honor, and to all of you, thank you, bottom of my heart.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Doug. If we can pull the slides back up, I want to talk about something else that is about people. The Industry Achievement Award is about the people who've made this industry possible. And we're a global organization here at AdTech, and we're also a global industry. And as you all know, we've had a devastating earthquake which has been affecting our friends in Japan and making their lives very, very difficult. And so we have here, we're very blessed to have here, Masato Takatomi. Please stand up. This is the president of our Japan office. We have a whole team from Japan here. Guys, if you're in the room, please stand up and wave. Thank you so much for coming. And we want to support you. So you can learn more about the Pray for Japan campaign at that URL. And of course, I managed to break it on the Facebook, on the one. And there's a Facebook group you can join. You don't have to do anything. Thank you so much. You don't have to do anything digital. You can also just go downstairs. We have a box. We're trying to help as much as we can. So take this seriously, please, because we can talk all day about digital, but sometimes there's concrete reality where people are having really, really severe challenges, and we'd like to help. So now we're also talking about global right now, and the person I'm going to bring to the stage in just a moment is the founder of the World Internet Project. Jeffrey Cole is the director of the Center for the Digital Future at the Annenberg School at the University of Southern California. They have the best longitudinal data on how the internet is transforming the fabric of our lives, and they've been doing it for quite some time now. And I asked Jeff to come, and I thought, would it be the perfect way to close the day? We had the marketing strategy with Antonio this morning. We had an uplifting, enchanting talk by Guy in the afternoon. We've had an enormous number of content about iPads and mobile and everything. It's been a day where it's been chock full of the pieces. But right now, let's bring all of the pieces together. And the best person who can do that for us is coming to the stage. Let's give a warm round of applause to Jeff Cole.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for this great time slot, incidentally. Midnight was filled. Anyway, it is really nice to be here, even at this late hour. So let's get started. There are a lot of friends in the audience, so I'm not going to spend more than 30 seconds talking about the work I do. But I'm an old television guy who was taught that we lost a great opportunity in the 40s understanding the impact of television. And I became convinced in the 90s that digital was going to be far more important than television. So 11 years ago, we started this massive project, this tracking of digital, first the web and now mobile, that we thought should have been conducted of television in the 40s. For 11 years now, starting in the US, we've gone back to the same people year after year, watching as non-users moved to dial-up, as dial-up users went to broadband. We watch as 2% drop off the web each year and want to know who are the people who leave and why. And more importantly, do they return? And if so, when and what brings them back? And then 11 years in, we continue to track the never users and want to know how the people who have never been online do things in a world where most of us are online. We started in the US, we're now doing this work in about 35 countries around the world, and I'll give you our website at the end if you want to look at some of our international work. What I want to do with the time I have at the end of the day is share some of the highlights of what we found over the last 11 years. And first, we're finding that schedules are almost gone. The old way with newspapers, that if you're standing on your doorstep, the moment the newspaper arrives, it's already 6 hours out of date. And if you read a story and you want an update, you have to wait 24 hours. That just doesn't work for almost anyone anymore. We were curious a couple of years ago to see how up to the moment newspapers on the web have to be. The answer is 30 to 60 seconds. If you're driving home listening to a game, pull into the garage, walk into the kitchen, say hello to the family, and then go to the computer or the iPad. You don't want the score 20 minutes ago. You want to know what happened in the 2 or 3 minutes since you parked your car. Music used to have one of the most formalized schedules of any medium. A group would get together, produce about 40 minutes worth of music, 36 to 40 minutes, because that was the length of 2 sides of an LP. When CDs came along and could go up to 72 minutes, most groups still stayed at the 36 to 40 minute level. With about 12 songs, they would release one of the songs on the radio. Hopefully it would become successful. 6 weeks later, a second song, and if it was a really good album, a third song might go on the radio. And 6 to 8 months in, the group would go on tour, and then 18 months later, the whole cycle would start over again. Now, for some people, that never worked. For Prince, unlike most mortal human beings, in the 80s and 90s, Prince could produce 10 to 12 albums a year worth of material. And according to my friends who worked at Warner Brothers Records, his label, most of it was really good. But that drove Warner Brothers crazy. There was no way to release 10 albums a year. It flooded the system. People couldn't distinguish between all the music, and he eventually left his label in disgust. Today, we're waiting for the new model to see whether groups and individuals still produce a whole album and 40 minutes worth of music, although we know there's very little market now for the bad songs, and we used to be compelled to buy 12 songs when we only wanted 2, or whether they just produce the 2 songs every couple of months. And television was on such a schedule that the greatest success in the history of magazine publishing, TV Guide, came from a magazine that listed what was on television. And the only bad business decision I think Rupert Murdoch has ever made, we'll see what happens with the Wall Street Journal, was buying TV Guide in 1990 from Walter Annenberg for $3 billion and selling it 2 years ago for less than the cost of one issue on the newsstand, for less than $1. So schedules are disappearing. We know that we have too many choices. In 1975, in the average American city, 90%, most of us had 7 television channels, 90% of viewing was on 3, ABC, CBS, and NBC. 30 years later, most markets had well over 100 channels, and 90% of viewing was on 6 or 7 channels. You give people infinitely more choice, and we only move out or branch out a little bit. Restaurant owners know that. Restaurant owners know that people really don't like Cheesecake Factory menus. 20-page menus frustrate people. They can't make choices. There's too much to choose from. Most people in a restaurant want 8 to 10 choices. Enough choices to feel they can actually make a choice, but not so many that they're overwhelmed. And on the web, where technically we have tens of millions of choices, but let's be practical, for most of us we have thousands of choices, 90% of internet time is spent in 15 places. And all the other millions of places account for less than 10% of our internet time. We're overwhelmed by choice. We know that all of our media survive, but most of our media in the future will survive as smaller players and smaller businesses. Let's look at that for a minute. Starting with the film business. The film business has been shrinking for a long time. Its high point was not 5, 10 years ago before the advent of digital. Its high point was in the 1930s and 40s before the introduction of television. But this year, film has experienced its most serious decline in a very long time. Film attendance so far this year is down 20%. Hollywood's looking at economic factors, but is really settling on the fact that it's probably the quality of films. DVDs, which kept the film industry afloat during much of the 21st century, are disappearing and not coming back, and we think physically DVDs will be gone in 4 years as everything moves into the cloud. And movie theaters, which have been seriously overbuilt, we're now going to see many or most, not all of them, close. A war is brewing. I don't know how many of you have paid attention. A war is brewing in the movie business between the studios and the theaters right now, and the theaters can't catch a break. The studios want to release films on the day they're released to home video as well as into the theaters. The theater owners have threatened to go to war if they do that, so the theater studios have started with a stopgap measure. They now want to take films that have been in the theaters for 2 months and make them available on home video. And now this week, the theater owners said if they do that, they won't run trailers for any of the studios. But at the same time as we're seeing film move closer into the home, and the distinction between the home screen and the film screen is getting shorter and narrower, and the quality of the sets is getting bigger. But theater owners are about to experience another serious problem. Historically, when a film opened in a theater, the first week or so, these numbers varied based on what film it was and how much clout the studio had. But historically, when a film first opened, the first week, 80 to 90% of the revenue went to the studio, and 10 to 20% went to the theater. And the longer the film stayed in the theater, the more the ratio changed, and the balance went to the theater owner. The studios who didn't like that ensured over the last 20 years that so many theaters have been built that most films are out of the theater now within 3 weeks. If you look at in a typical year of 52 weeks, usually will be 40 different films that have been #1. Most films this week, Hop, happened to make it to #1 for the second week in a row. But with the exception of Avatar, we haven't seen a film in the last 5 years that has been #1 more than 3 weeks in a row. So because they were getting a declining part of the movie ticket, theater owners were, of course, hiking up the price of refreshments. And that's now about to experience a serious challenge. Some of you from New York know that about 2 years ago, there was a law that said that fast food restaurants had to post the number of calories in their food where people could see it clearly. And people were shocked when they went into Starbucks that there was practically not an item on the Starbucks menu that was less than 500 calories. And people simply stopped buying it. And now Starbucks has found lower fat foods and lower calorie foods, exactly what the law was intended. Well, now there are people who want to see calorie counts on movie theater food. And the minute that happens, the game is over. A large popcorn and a Coke is about 1,600 calories, about all that anyone should eat for the whole day in 3 days' worth of fat. So theaters have got all kinds of issues. But as we look at the movie business, the power remains with those who create good content. The old adage, content is king, is true. The music business, it used to take selling 15 million copies of an album to be #1. Last year, the #1 selling album of the year, Eminem's Recovery, sold 3.4 million copies. Digital, within the next 3 years, is going to pass the CD sources of revenue. We think just as DVDs will disappear, CDs will disappear and move to the cloud in a matter of 4 or 5 years. We've already seen people turn against them for environmental reasons and their packaging. And we think music, as we can clearly see, is becoming supplemental. It's becoming the place you get familiar with the music, and the real money comes from touring, merchandising, and advertising. And the power in the music world rests with everybody. It rests with the consumer, the artist, everybody except the music company. In the book publishing business, Book publishing sales, long before the internet, have been pitiful for a generation. If you look at the status area of book publishing, hardcover, nonfiction books, we're a country of 300 million people, and this number hasn't changed for 30 years. To get on the New York Times bestseller list, out of a country of 300 million people, you have to sell 15 to 20,000 copies of a book. Less than 1/100th of 1% gets you on the New York Times bestseller list. We're not a country of book-reading people. 50% of us buy 0 books a year, and of the 50% of us who buy books, 70% of them buy 1 or 2 books a year. Books are bought by a small minority. Amazon last year now makes more revenue from its digital sales than it does from its hardcover sales. And books, physical books, we think survive, but we think you're going to pay a very precious premium to own art books, beautiful books. Most of our books are going to go to digital, and we're going to own a small number, I would say 30 to 40. For some people, that's actually a large number. Beautiful, expensive books. And self-publishing, which used to be a necessity for some people who couldn't get their books published and used to be low rent and now no status, now looks like a smart business choice. And therefore, the power in the book publishing business rests with authors. And just to finish this, newspapers, we know that 30 years ago, teenagers didn't read newspapers, but started to when they got into their 20s and 30s. Today, they don't read newspapers, and the evidence is clear they never will. In the work we do, when internet penetration around the world gets to 30%, offline newspaper sales begin to decline. So India, where internet penetration's at 15%, newspaper sales are skyrocketing. But by the time they get to 30, they will begin to decline. The sad truth for newspapers is every time a newspaper reader dies, he or she is not being replaced by a new reader. 11 years ago, I went to the biggest newspaper conference in America, and I stood up and I said, just what I just said, every time one of your readers dies, they're not being replaced by a new reader. I said, you have 25 to 30 years left. They called me dangerous. They called me an alarmist. They called me everything except what it turns out I actually was, which is not correct. I was an optimist. Because if I was right 11 years ago that they had 25 to 30 years left, today they would have 15 to 20. I think in America they have less than 5. In 1900, we had 600 communities that had 2 or more newspapers. Today, we have 6 that have 2 or more newspapers. And instead of counting down the 2 newspaper towns, we're now counting up the no newspaper towns. And we're currently in a city that's pretty soon going to be a no newspaper town. The power, we think, in the newspaper business goes to global players, like the New York Times, whose growth the last 10 years has been outside of New York, not inside of New York. If you look at the International Herald Tribune, which the New York Times bought 50% of from the Washington Post, they already own 50%. The minute they got control, they rebranded it the global edition of the New York Times. We're going to see 4 or 5 global American voices, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, probably the Washington Post. I used to think it would be my beloved Los Angeles Times. It won't. I used to think it would be USA Today. It won't. But they will be global players. Despite all this grim news, there's actually some encouraging developments. All hype aside, I really believe the iPad is transformational. I think it's one of the most remarkable devices that offers an incredible opportunity to publishers and to all consumers. And first, and a lot of people disagree and talk about the advent of Android and Honeycomb, I think it's going to be the iPad. Our work showed If you talk to teenagers, this is over the last 10 years, they think they're not affected by advertising or brand. They think they're too smart, too shrewd, too sophisticated. And I used to always tell people, if you want to see how much your teenager is affected by advertising or brand, try giving him or her an MP3 player that is not an iPod, and then duck quickly as they throw it back at you. I think it's going to be the iPad. Even I think it was Gartner or Forrester yesterday released a report predicting that through 2015 it will still have a 50% market share. I think that's conservative. I've never seen a device in my experience that got this close to getting it right on the first try. There are things they would fix. A lot of cynics say they didn't put the camera in so they'd have a reason to sell you the iPad 2. That appears to be true. But the amazing thing about the iPad, not the 2, the iPad, it's been out for a year and no one has really caught up with them. And Apple has moved I sound like a commercial, but I really believe this. Apple has moved the goalpost before the other teams have even taken the field. And what's so remarkable of the iPad, it does so many things so well, but the one thing that just absolutely boggles my mind every time I use it is the fact that I turn it on and 1 second later, I'm working. There's no 3 or 4 minute boot that 1 out of 10 times produces the blue screen of death. Those things are all gone. If you turn it off and you forgot to do something, you go back and 1, 2 seconds later, you're working in it again. And keep in mind, this is so simple and obvious, but so important. Keep in mind, newspapers and magazines were never going to do very well on the internet. No, because the internet till now was a lean forward experience. Nobody wants to lean forward and read a newspaper. They might read an article in the newspaper. It was Jeff Bezos who figured out that if people were going to read books electronically, it had to be in the same environment they actually read books, leaning back, in bed, in the bathtub, anywhere they want to read it, and created the Kindle. And what the iPad and all tablets does now is it restores newspapers and magazines to their natural environment. The other thing we're going to see with the iPad is, in my opinion, the beginning of the end of the mouse. I was in Barcelona at the World Mobile Congress. 4 different people used the same example. They weren't stealing from each other. They used the example of their children going to the television set and going like this, and then saying, "Daddy, what's wrong?" We've seen Windows 7. Most of you don't know this, but Windows 7 is a touchscreen system. Most of us don't have touchscreen monitors. I think Microsoft, to give them the only due they've probably deserved in the last 10 years, Kinect is an amazing system. And we think all this, the iPad's just leading the way on all of this. I could go on, but we really do think it's transformational. Also, in all this bad news, we think television is the medium that grows rather than shrinks. Our work shows definitively that people will watch on a 3rd screen, not just on a television screen at home. The first screen is bigger and better than it's ever been. The gap between the home and the theater is narrower than it's ever been. And the most powerful thing with television, it's escaping from the home. Television couldn't grow until now because it already dominated our at-home awake time. Most of us turn the television set on the moment we enter the home, leave it on till we go to sleep. Some of us go to sleep with it on, and some of us even leave it on when we're not at home so that people think we are at home. So television could only grow as it left the home. And now we watch television at the airport waiting for a flight, on the airplane itself, in the back seat of our cars, hopefully not the front seat while we're driving. And television becomes our constant companion. And in the last 2 years, we and Nielsen and everybody else have seen this phenomenal rise in ratings of live events. The World Cup overseas, the Super Bowl, which this year had the highest ratings in the history of American television, the first thing to surpass the final episode of MASH in 1983. The Grammys and the Emmys have had higher ratings. The Oscars didn't, because however, they hired those two stupid hosts to run the show. But we've seen all these live events with higher ratings, and the reason for that, you won't see them back next year. The reason for that is because of co-viewing. We've always had co-viewing at home with other people in the room, but now we're seeing co-viewing through social networking, where people who are not together are watching as if they are together. I think the crawl at the beginning of at the bottom of the screen, which we saw come into being after 9/11 so we could have a supplemental news source, I think that's going to be replaced by a social networking crawl, where you can share your thoughts. I think one of the great killer apps we're going to see, this is either a billion-dollar idea that I shouldn't give away, or something so simple that it's going to be free, and I think it'll be the latter, will be an app that will let all of us, even the size of this audience if we want, record something on our PVRs and then synchronize it so that we can watch it together as if it's live. And on the subjects of things that may disappear, this is not a headline grabber, we may see laugh tracks disappear on television. Movies don't have laugh tracks because producers know you're going to be watching them in the theater with other people. Television comedies had laugh tracks because they wanted you to laugh. We laugh more when other people around us laugh, and we may be watching in bed by ourselves, but now that we may be doing much of our television watching with other people through social networks, we may see the laugh track disappear. And the power in the television business rests with the content creators and ultimately the viewers who watch it when, where, and how we want. And my last slide, and I'll finish with this, a couple of new trends we're seeing. Screen time is exploding. In 1975, in the developed world, we spent 16 hours in front of a screen. Last year, it was up to 36 hours. We think it'll be over 50 hours in the next 3 to 4 years. If you look at a teenager, there's practically not a moment of their lives, except when they're in school and asleep, that they're not in front of a screen. And I'm not so sure they're not in front of a screen when they're in school. They certainly are during lunch and recess, and probably more than we'd like to admit during class. And we know that 80% of them sleep within arm's length of their mobile phones. So screen time is exploding. You want to know how powerfully important these mobile phones are to our lives? We've noticed that people almost never lose their mobile phones. They can drop them in the gutter, they can be stolen, but the reason we almost never lose them is that if we leave our phone on the table in a restaurant, we can't make it to the front door of the restaurant before we're reaching for it. We can't get far enough away from it to lose it. Whereas if I leave my credit card in a restaurant, it may take 2 days to notice it's gone and I have to retrace my steps. About the only way I think you can lose your phone is if you're getting out of a cab and slam the door and the cab is gone before you notice that your phone's sitting. That happened to a friend of mine. But that's about the only way. We're seeing privacy concerns terrify people. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen the greatest theft of email addresses we've ever seen, which is going to produce an enormous amount of spam. But I'm particularly interested in targeted advertising. I'm not a shill for the advertising business. I think if digital content's going to survive, it's going to be largely through advertising. I want to see digital content survive, so I want to see digital advertising survive. I think targetability with limits provides a great bonus to the media owner, who can charge 10 times as much to give an audience that the advertiser wants. I think it's a boom to the advertiser, who can reverse the most powerful quote in the history of advertising, a quote that's so powerful it's a cliche, the old Wanamaker, I know half my advertising budget is wasted, I just don't know which half. And I think it's a boom to the consumer, who can start receiving advertising that is relevant and engaging. I think it's going to be fun once the shock wears away. And I remember 20 years ago the shock I discovered when I called American Express and they said, "Hello, Mr. Cole, how are you?" And you're looking around for the cameras. And then when you figure it out, you actually think it's courteous. I think we're going to get that same shock and then welcome it when our mobile phones tell us that we've just gone on to aisle 7 of the supermarket and there's the specials available to you on aisle 7. But I think what happens with privacy and targetability is 4 simple things. I think newspapers, television producers, advertisers have to tell their customers, their readers, their viewers what information is being collected and why and what's going to be done with it. Second, there have to be privacy statements not written by lawyers for lawyers. They can be written by lawyers, but not for lawyers. Third, there have to be serious penalties for anyone who violate those policies. And fourth, there has to be a simple opt-out or opt-in, but those who opt out may have to start paying for what other people get for free. Social networking, I could spend the next hour and a half. It may feel like I've been going an hour and a half. We really do think social networking is the real deal. We had predicted, I don't say this with any boasting, we had predicted 6 years ago when Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace that he wouldn't be able to hang on to the teenage users of MySpace. We had seen with the rise and fall of GeoCities and the rise and fall of Friendster, many of you have heard me say this, that to a teenager, an online community is like a nightclub, and when the uncool kids start showing up at the nightclub, or the nightclub becomes too popular, you're out of there, and of course, what's the worst thing that could happen to you in a nightclub? Your mother shows up, and now your mother wants to friend you on Facebook. We think the same thing is going to happen to Facebook. But we don't think it's going to happen for at least 5 years. I think Facebook, which is at 560, 70 million people, is going to climb probably close to 1 billion. I don't think we're ever going to see another monolithic community like Facebook again. I think it's going to fragment into smaller communities. But keep in mind, the heaviest users of social networking are people in their 60s and 70s. People who derive the most value out of it are people in their 60s and 70s. They're in Facebook, but they're also in communities where they learn how to be a better chess player, how to deal with the physical or emotional toll of cancer, and talk about politics and religion. I think marketers and citizens, their learning curve has to be much steeper than their action curve. You don't have to be investing, buying, building, doing, but you have to be paying attention, learning, and watching. 4 years ago, I was telling every brand who would listen to me, learn everything there is to learn about Second Life. I wasn't telling them to go into Second Life and buy an island, but study it, learn it, pay attention. Today, my message to brands, if you're in Second Life, get the hell out as fast as you possibly can. Filled with sleaze, crime, terrorism. Turns out it needed at least self-regulation. There was a story in the paper about 6 months ago about a woman who was saying, my husband spends all his time in Second Life. He has a wife in Second Life. They have sex. They go shopping. She was much more annoyed that they went shopping. And then she admitted, he's never met this woman. They've never talked on the phone. Do I have a problem? Yes, you have a problem. But anyway, now I think the message with location-based, with all these other new options, is not to move necessarily, but to study, to pay attention, and to watch. We've seen with all this technology, nobody wants to give it up. There are things about the web and the internet we don't like, spyware, viruses, spam. None of those cause people to give it up. The 2% who drop off are people who lose their connection because they lose or change jobs or their computer breaks. But while nobody gives it up out of dissatisfaction, many of us are tired of this technology defining our lives. A phenomenon we're calling enough already, E-NUFF. These are the people saying, I want to enjoy the benefits of all this technology without experiencing all the disadvantages. For example, in our work, for a long time now, 70% of people say, 75%, excuse me, say this technology has made them more productive at work. 5% say it's made them less productive, and 20% say it hasn't made a difference. So most of us think it's made us more productive. But we don't work 30 hours a week now and call it a week. We take on more work than we've ever taken on before. We're working on Saturday nights, Sunday morning, Christmas Eve, New Year's Day. Employers complain about the amount of personal time people spend doing work at the office on the internet. I think they should bite their tongues. Our work shows that for every hour people spend at the office doing personal things, they spend 3 hours at home doing work related to their jobs. Many of us know that we don't go to sleep until we answer all of our email. And what happens if you answer all your email just before you go to sleep? Damn it, while you're sleeping, everybody answers you, and it's all sitting there when you get back. So what we're seeing with enough already is people are looking for balance. They want to answer their email. If, of course, teenagers aren't on email, they want to answer their email when they want to. They want to train people not to expect a response within 5 or 10 minutes. They want to take control. They want to enjoy the benefits without experiencing all the disadvantages. And lastly, when we started our work in 2000, it was a PC-based internet. And then we had laptops and netbooks, but that was still, even though those were mobile devices, it was still a PC-based internet. Then we began to see in 2004 this little peripheral thing which had an asterisk, the internet on mobile, on a truly mobile device that fits in your pocket. Now, we don't think mobile is just important. We think it's everything. I actually believe that only 4 to 6% of people who own PCs actually need PCs. Computer-assisted designers, heavy-duty number crunchers, writers. When the iPad came out, the first question I asked myself, is this a fourth screen, or does this replace the second screen? I now am firmly convinced that it replaces the second screen for all but 4 to 6% of us. And the only thing, many of us have already given up our laptops for tablets, and the only thing preventing most of the rest of us from doing so is Steve Jobs' stubbornness over USB ports and things like that, things he could change in an instant if he chose to. But we really believe the internet is going everywhere through mobile. As I said earlier, as India's 15% internet penetration gets to 30 or 40, it's not going to be with PCs on the desk. It's going to be through mobile phones. And we have never in the history of civilization seen anything that 5.7 billion people share. And the predictions are by 2015, there will be more than one cell phone for each person on the face of the earth. And that's not just rich countries where people have 2 lines. In the poorest parts of Africa, where wired infrastructures have never been built and now will never have to be built, farmers are able to get up-to-the-moment prices on their crops. Refugees are able to find their families in a way that was never possible before. And think about only 10 years ago after 9/11, when people wanted to find out if their loved ones were alive, they went down to Trinity Church with posters and put them up on the wall. Now that's all being done through mobile. So that's a little bit of our vision of where things have been the last 11 years or so. Anyone who's interested in our work is welcome to go to our website. Keep in mind that Digital Center is spelled the American way, or as I like to say, the right way. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, but why don't we do that? I'm going to stick around. There's a party that started, so why don't we end this, and anybody who wants to ask a question can just come up. Thank you, as always. It has been an enormous pleasure to be here. I knew you would appear from somewhere.
I always do. Thank you so much, Jeff. That brings the content for the first day of AdTech San Francisco 2011 to a close. Thank you so much for coming. Please have a drink outside. There are going to be a million parties going on tonight, and we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning for Arianna Huffington. Thank you so much.